Um, I would like to thank Konrad Adenauer Stiftung, Bologna Center, for this invitation. I must say that I had some logistical problems to organize my calendar in such a manner that I would come. But when I got this invitation, I said I have to come here for very selfish reason. Because part of my life was very much associated with the Bologna process. I was for many years working for UNESCO. I was first chief of higher education policy department in the UNESCO headquarters in Paris. But for the last period in my UN career was spent as director of the European Center for Higher Education, which means I was responsible for the UNESCO program in the field of higher education in the European region, which in UN also includes Israel. It's very European. And I attended all the ministerial meetings of the Bologna process since 1999 to 2009 when I retired. So in a way, I have this intrinsic understanding of the Bologna process. I like to say that I was in the kitchen of the Bologna process. So there are certain things for which you can consider me as they say it in France, responsable coupable, and there are certain things for which I have only a certain degree of responsibility. I'm very, very, very pleased that such center exists, and I'm very pleased in an extra way because Israel is not part of the Bologna process, at least for the time being. I was involved in the discussions, diplomatic discussions, when the issue has been raised, and you know, this is the one criteria, which is the diplomatic political one, which is the Council of Europe Culture Convention. And I do hope that it will be somewhat overcome as the Bologna process is now gaining a certain trans-regional dimension. You know, it is the most pan-European project, you know, I can say, out of all the projects which has been formulated. It now has 47 countries, and some of them would say, well, and in your speech, Mr. Director, you already mentioned it, how European is Israel. And I have nothing against it. I was actually contributing to the inclusion of such country like Kazakhstan to be the member of the Bologna process, and Israel is not. So I think that there is a need also particularly in thinking about the future of the Bologna process, to have this little bit more inclusive approach than it is until now. We will see it. I know that I'm still having the discussions with the colleagues in the Bologna follow-up group about this various policy options. But my hat, which I'm carrying with me today, is related to something which you had set as, which is foremost ranking. I will make a little bit in my presentation distinction between benchmarking and ranking, but it's appropriate, in my opinion, to put it together, because it's sometimes I don't want to be confused, but it is right to put it benchmarking as one of those instruments which are facilitating quality assurance, talking about quality dimension of what higher education is doing. Well, I agree with distinguished rector with all his critical remarks. I will try to I don't know if will satisfy his or his complaints, but I want to tell you, and I don't know how much time you have it, but I wanted to tell you that the world of higher education listens to such critical remarks, you know, and there are certain areas in which we are on the way of introducing improvements. You know it very well that the world of higher education, universities are part of the group of institutions which are slow system institutions. Yeah? I also had this experience. I was for 2 years vice rector of the university, and I know how difficult it is to move any change in the field of higher education, and particularly in such a delicate thing as higher education and science. Well, why we are observing emergence of ranking, and what was the reason? Because, and I can go back to, again, to the, and probably I will be the last time I'm making the reference to my own personal story, is that when I was working as one of the persons designing the policy of higher education of UNESCO, which is not for UNESCO itself, but for the member states, for the 190 countries in the world, which some of them, not all of them, but prevailing majority, have the higher education institutions. And when UNESCO decided to organize the first World Conference on Higher Education, I was drafting the policy document of UNESCO. The term ranking did not appear, not at all. I would say that it appeared for the first time, not even in the Bologna process, in the first declaration, the second communique of the ministers. It appeared, I would say, sometimes in around London ministerial conference, when there was the instruments for when the issue of competitiveness and assessment of quality became quite apparent. Well, I think that we can say that why rankings appeared and why rankings will not disappear are for the fundamental reasons. The paradigm of higher education has changed. And there are two things which are probably the most, there are several things, but I will not rank them, I will just mention them, is that the paradigm of higher education has changed, and here, can you, the first slide? I had summarized a certain major transformation, and the intensity of it varies in various regions, but in part of the region in which we are and for which we are particularly interested, is evident that we have the phenomenon of massification of higher education. You know, if you look at such indicator as participation rate, you know, there's until 1990s, but the average participation rate was between 15 and 20% of the age cohort 18 to 23. Nowadays, at least in the developed countries, and you can use it as a denominator, membership of OECD or European Union, is 45, 50. A number of countries like Republic of Korea, Canada, exceeding 60%. This trend of massification is with us, and that is something which is, for a variety of reasons, is probably phenomenon which will be generalized. You know, the policy of the United States and President Obama made a certain degree of promise and commitment about the participation rate, which should be above 60, and that every eligible young person should experience of tertiary education, which in the United States means at least have a level of community college access to higher education. Number of students, absolute numbers, has increased. We have now around 100 million students in the world, and the prediction is that in 2050 it will be 200. So that's we are talking about really big numbers. Evidently, it is evident that it's also you have the diversification. Not all of them are going to the top universities. You have a diversification of the student population. You know, the Gauss curve evidently defines that not all of them have this capacity. And there's no need. And last but not least, there's not enough money to do this. So diversification is another phenomenon which we have to live with and accept it. Definitely, there's another element of diversification, which is institutions. You have to have a diversified system of higher education. Strength of the higher education in the United States is based, in my opinion, on the existence of what I would call it, pyramid of institutions. If you look at the bottom of this pyramid, our community college. Overall, we estimate that there's 3,000 plus institutions of tertiary education in the United States. 1,700 are community colleges, which don't even give bachelor's degree. They give community college certificate. There are liberal arts colleges and colleges which give only bachelor's degree. There are institutions, universities, which give bachelor's plus master's. And then at the higher and higher, you have the doctoral degree granting institutions. And on the top pinnacle of the pyramid are not only Ivy League, but this one which we know it is the members of the American Association of Universities. How many? 60, plus 2 Canadian universities. So you see, out of this total big number, there are only very few institutions which are really those at the top. So, and that is the strength. The institutions which are lower in the pyramid are also benefiting from the fact that there are institutions of higher education for a variety of reasons. One of them is prestige. We have the general good opinion, particularly from the outside. If you are inside, you have more diverse opinion about the quality of American higher education. So that is evident that because of this, I made the reference to the Gauss curve distribution of the talent, is that very few people, unfortunately, God's given talent, and therefore you compete for them. You compete foremost for talented students, because our interest in the context of ranking is particularly for the excellence. So you have the students as well as the faculty, which we can consider as excellent. The next argument is internationalization and globalization. There are some analysts of this phenomenon who prefer to make a distinction between internationalization and globalization. Our discussion is not about this one, so I will merge it together. Anyway, globalization is a factor in which we are nowadays surviving, and how you manage with globalization will determine your performance. And we are affected directly or indirectly. I sometimes call it, we are lived each of us in the applied format of globalization, because what happens, we are affected by decisions on which we sometimes have a very little influence, but we have to live with it. Globalization is also linked to another aspect is the impact of technology. There's the internet is changing slowly but surely also the way how the traditional modes of delivery of higher education is changing. I have MOOCs. Everyone knows what is now the impact of MOOCs. It's not yet. It's not yet to such a way how some of those who are promoting the MOOCs. Just a small remark. I was, and still in my earlier incarnation, I was looking very much about this phenomenon of the virtual universities. If you remember, there was a period in the virtual university was promising to change the universe of higher education, that virtual universities practically will move out the traditional universities out of the stage. And we had organized a special research project and which ended up with the conference in Puerto Rico, because the Puerto Rico State University was eager to open its virtual university campus. To make a long story short, it came out that the level of expectation exceeded the impact, and quite a number of serious organizations like the World Bank put a lot of money, particularly in development of virtual universities in Africa. Did you hear about something which was the virtual university around? No, we know that it is not this way, but what has happened is that we can say that nowadays many students who used to be and still are students in the traditional universities are actually operating like a virtual university, and most of the students nowadays are having a contact with the tutor or the professor or with the peers through internet. So they are in this mode of interaction has changed, which is no longer in a traditional way. In other way, the technology is entering traditional type of higher education by osmotic manner. It's a smooth osmotic acceptance, but nevertheless it is changing. And here is another problem, which I would say to which we have not really came out with a proposal which will satisfy this. This is a tightening public budget. I think we are coming to the position in which society, our own societies, are started to question the level of funding to which is allocated to higher education. I'm afraid that, and there's enough of research showing that the level that we cannot expect any longer increase of the public funding. So the funds available for the student per student will not increase. By the way, Bologna process was a European response also, among other things, to the dilemma of funding, because the student enrollment trend was very clearly indicating towards massification, while the level of public funding did not follow the rate of the increase of the student enrollment. So what is the two trends, and the difference between student enrollment trend and the public level funding trend was increasing, which means the implication of it is if it's not immediate one, but in the long term is that you will have diminishing resources for the students, which means the problem of quality is coming. Well, now we move to the world of ranking. First of all, I have here on this slide presented a taxonomy of academic rankings, which will introduce you to the world of ranking. And we can say that there's certain, and I propose here in the slides, the three criteria on which this distinction between various rankings can be detected. First is the ranking which is one-dimensional, in which assessment according to one set of indicators and weights attached to a given indicator. What does it mean? It means that you have chosen a certain indicators, the criteria on which you will take into consideration when designing your methodology, and you give the weight to it. So if, for example, Nobel Prize winners is for me so important, as it is the case of the Shanghai ranking, then I give, and there's the case, 20% of my 100. You cannot go to more than 100. So this is one thing. So that when you are producing the ranking, you have those who are reading it have no influence on the position of the institution or the object of ranking. And this is something which is, we are coming across ranking almost on daily, regular basis. Now everything is ranked and everything, this is I would say a societal phenomenon nowadays, ranking. There's rankings of hospitals, ranking of not only going beyond the consumer guides, not only the washing machines and cars. And the other important group of ranking is multidimensional ranking, which means that you have, as a ranking body, you have chosen the criteria, okay, but you cannot add your own preference for the specific indicator, but you, as an user of ranking, you can attach weight, which is, I would say, very important differentiation, because if you are a student, you might have a different interest and attach different importance to that particular indicator than the other one. To make it very clear, even among the students you might have a difference. But if you have a student and you want to go to the, let's say, to study at the PhD level, doctoral student, you might not be interested in the, even doctoral students probably more, but as a student, it's not so important if you have a Nobel Prize on the faculty. If you are if you are an academic and you want to enter into collaboration, that's a different ballgame. That's a different story. The same is if there's a funding body to allocate the money for research. It is not so interested about the quality of teaching. It might be interested about the outcome of research. And if you look at that, for example, it's not only commercial bodies which are doing the ranking. I'll say a little bit more later on, but there's there are funding organizations. Deutsche Forschungsgemeinschaft is producing the ranking, and they don't take into consideration teaching, but they are interested in the research. So I think that this is important. This is important differentiation here. Now, with regard to the difference between benchmarking and ranking. The ranking is presenting the outcome of the exercise in the numerical order. Okay? You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can of course put them in the certain badges. This is in the brackets that you don't give the number, but you will give this from 1 to 50. You can see this, for example, in the Shanghai ranking, numerical audio presentation is up only to the 100, and then you have the group, and then you have less and less. The sequential, and for the reasons which I would say are logical. Benchmarking is a different story. In benchmarking, you have agreed at a certain standard, and then you can look at this, where I stay vis-a-vis the standard. Okay, and this is in rank. If the ranking goes like this, there's a vertical. Benchmarking is more horizontal exercise, and you can of course use the benchmarking in a very different manner. You can see it how I stay vis-a-vis the benchmark, and whether I want to exceed the benchmark or whether I'm matching with the benchmark, and that the whole exercise is also organized differently. Most of the benchmarking is done within the group of institutions. Therefore you have so-called benchmarking clubs, and it's more collaborative arrangement than it is the ranking. Ranking is more imposed. It's from the top down. It's imposed on it. Benchmarking is more collaborative.
it says it's the use of benchmark is in reality very different. I was involved in the drafting of the guidelines for benchmarking clubs, and so it's a very different both are very important, and then there is another dimension. Very important is the geographical dimension. You have international rankings like Shanghai ranking, QS, and so on. I will present them later on a little bit in more detail. You have also regional rankings for one particular geographical region and national rankings. There are quite important difference between international rankings and national rankings for several reasons. So I will to which I will talk about. And then, last but not least, something which is a new phenomenon, which is the system level ranking. There was a very well taken argument by one of the authorities on the whole issue of world-class excellence ranking benchmarking. Jamil Salmi, who worked for the World Bank, was my colleague for policy making in the World Bank, and he rightly was pointing out that from the country it is not so. It is relevant, but it's more important is to have the highly performing system than only to have one university. So very recently, a group which is called U21, which is an association of the research universities, decided to come out with methodology to produce the system ranking, and it's done by the Institute of Economics, Applied Economics from the University of Melbourne. They published 3 editions of such ranking, and they don't cover for the time being more than 50 countries. So this is a ranking in which Israel is performing much better than in other rankings for some obvious and less obvious reasons. Well, now the next. From international university rankings, I made the distinction between most frequently, and most frequently it means most frequently referred to. I mean, it's not the label, quality of labor whatsoever. First of all, there's a right to say the academic, the ranking, the Shanghai ranking, academic ranking of world universities. We don't have time to talk about the story about the Shanghai ranking. It is a fascinating story because it was sometimes, in a misleading way, it is somewhat presented in some quarters, is that this is a kind of the complot of the Anglo-Saxon model of tertiary education, that it has liberal roots and so on. Actually, it was a political decision of the Chinese government to look at the performance of the Chinese universities. Why? Because they were aware that the period in which China can base its development on the cheap labor will disappear very quickly. So, if we want to go to the indigenous capacity for research and technology, where to go? You have to go to the universities. If you want to, you have to look where are the Chinese, where the Chinese universities are in comparison with the other highly performing institutions, and what are the characteristics of those institutions and so on. The results were very bad, and it was the fact that the Shanghai ranking has been published at all is just a coincidence, and it was. To make a long story short, it was Shanghai ranking came at the right moment. It's a window of opportunity for this particular initiative because it suddenly came out with something which the world was looking at, and I think that this was links to this era of globalization in which there was this need for coming out of the national shell and to compare yourself vis-a-vis the others. The other ranking, which is well known and was referred to already, is the QS. It is different. The producer of ranking is very different. The Shanghai ranking is produced by the team of researchers from the Jiao Tong University. The QS produced is by the consulting firm, which is QS Intelligence Unit, and therefore sometimes the reasons for it is quite different, because one of the criticisms of the QS is producing all kinds of rankings. So you say you say you want to design the ranking to the customer more than the actually is needed. The other one is the times higher, and I can skip it quickly because we will have from Tom Batty, who is in charge of it, with Phil Batty. Yeah, the editor of the Times will have a video from it. Yeah. And the last but not, I mentioned this one U21 ranking here, the level ranking. And last but not least, U-multi-rank, which is, Mr. Rector, Mr. President, you like it so much. And I think that my colleague, Gero Federkeil and Frans van Voogd and others would like it very much. And most of all, European Commission would like to know your point of view. There are some problems with the U-multi-rank. Is the complexity of it, the work involved in it, because it's very, very, very demanding. When I was vice rector and I tried to bring my university we participated in the feasibility study, and it was very difficult for me to convince the people to provide the data, because the complexity of the. But I think that this is something which is as we call it in German, Kinderkrankheit. You know, it's an evolving process, and I would say, even that's my private opinion, well, public, because I told them that they're going too fast. You know, I would say that this is something that should not add so quickly all those disciplines, to allow the university to accommodate with this, but that's enough. That's for another. There are also some other rankings, you know, the international rankings, which are referred to. One of them is Webometrics. It's an interesting, probably the most inclusive ranking, because it looks at the presence of universities on internet. So they look at how well is structured the website, how many people are visiting the website. It is done by the team associated with the body, which is kind of the supervisory body for the policy making in research in Spain. There is a ranking which is less visible now, is the performance ranking of scientific papers, which for them, the only source for information, and we don't have very much time, but those rankings, as usual, some of them are generate their own information. So, by what? By surveys. But for example, Shanghai ranking fully rely on the primary data. They don't collect themselves the data. They receive the data which has been collected earlier by somebody else, which creates its advantage, because you don't have objectivity. You are not responsible for eventual failures or shortcomings, because somebody else has assumed this responsibility. They look at only at the scientific papers. The other ranking, which is in that line, relying very much on bibliometrics, is the Leiden ranking. which is only using bibliometrical data, know about reputation, know about prestige, Nobel Prize, and so on. Then there's more exotic ranking, which is that one done in Spain. See, in Journal of Country Ranking. This is the beauty of this particular ranking is that they include the publications, the scientific publications, not only of universities but also of the Academy of Sciences, and also, which is not something extraordinary rare, that some pharmaceutical companies are also doing research, and they participate in the exchange of knowledge. So there are also some, and there are some bodies in some countries which are not Academy of Sciences, like Max Planck Institute. That is also the scientific production of such bodies is also evaluated in that particular ranking. So what is the value, in my opinion, is that we see science and the research production in a more holistic way. And the newcomer in this particular group of ranking is the best global university ranking. Just the last year, the U.S. World News Report embarked on publishing of this type of ranking. What you could see is from this list is that and this is a concluding remark for this particular group of ranking, is that these are the rankings which focus on research performance. Hardly any of these rankings deal with the teaching. I would say that there are two, which are one which this is the Shanghai ranking, in which as your rector has lightly pointed out, using a proxy. I would say they are using the proxy of the proxy, because they say that the quality of the faculty will determine the quality of the teaching, and therefore the teaching can be evaluated this way. QS is doing assessment of teaching on the basis of the reputation, on the view how it is being viewed by the employers, and the opinion. What is and this needs to be recognized, that QS has done it over the last period of years, 2-3 years, made an effort to be that the surveys, the quality of the way how the surveys are conducted has improved substantially. Now they have, for example, for the employer's view about the quality of the graduates, because this is what it's all about, is they use 12,000 answers from 12,000 employers. There are 60,000 various academics and graduates who are invited to participate in the surveys. So at least from that point of view, there is some progress. Well, what are the main trends next one? Main trends in international rankings. I would say, yes, we had the acceptance and consolidation of rankings. The rankings has been, hardly there is a university which would not make the reference to rankings, and the rankings are used in various way and in various types of actions. I just grab it on the way flying to Tel Aviv, The Economist, the latest issue of the Economist, and where is the announcement for the recruitment of the president of the École Polytechnique Fédérale in Lausanne, which is a very highly performing technical university in Switzerland. And they make a reference, they about in the announcement to the fact that this higher education institutions, and I quote it, has rapidly become one of the internationally top-ranked universities in the fields of technical and natural sciences as well as the life sciences. So this kind of the references, you will find it almost on a regular basis. Even those who criticize rankings will actually make the reference. I made once an exercise. In Europe there's an organization which is called, the name of it is LERU, which is an association of research intensive universities, and they published a critical report about early stage of one of the rankings, international rankings. And it was a statement, and so I went to the exercise. If the members of LERU, very distinguished bona fide research universities, if what they said in this statement corresponds to their behavior as institutions. And actually, almost all of them had a reference to rankings on their website. Actually, the certain institutions start with the rankings. We are a highly ranked institution, and then they go. Anyway, rankings are popular because they respond to the demand for this type of information. So that is something, it is a little bit consumer-driven phenomenon. They serve as a benchmark. You have chosen that I will consider this particular university, which is ranked. I don't advise that you would use Harvard as a benchmark, but maybe a university which you consider as not a little bit better or as us, and we know we have an idea that we could perform even better than them, but to use it as a benchmark and to look where they perform well, in which areas we are performing well. They can be even the result in the ranking in itself, can be used as a benchmark to look at how are we. The rector was talking about this drive for the publishing in the highly cited journals. Okay, and so you look at in the Shanghai ranking, how our institutions is actually in this particular indicator. Indicator used in the ranking can serve as a benchmarking reference point. The rankings can be helpful in clarification of the mission, what we want to achieve. Definitely, they are marketing. They are very good in marketing. They are in a condensed way. They present. They give a picture of the performance of the institution. In other ways, it is like reputation, for example, is intangible asset, but can bring a tangible results because of the money coming from funding, money which can be associated with more international students, and so on. There is also what is another trend which we see is diversification of ranking-related services. A good example is QS, which is on the basis of ranking, is also giving advices on the other domains. Well, I think that I was praising sufficiently the value of ranking, but I mentioned only one Kinderkrankheit problem with ranking, but here I just presented to you several rankings which are criticism of ranking which are important to keep in mind. That is true that they are focused on elite research-intensive universities. I earlier said about presenting the new paradigm of or the changes in the paradigm on the landscape of higher education, the increase of the number of institutions, and the ranking are are actually covering only a small percentage of those institutions. If you look at the Shanghai ranking, covers only 500 institutions. They collect information about 1,200 institutions, but what they publish is 500. Times 200. QS 200, maybe it's 300 in some cases. So overall, it is a very small number, with the exception of this Webometrics, which covers some 7,000 institutions. But it is still only a part of the higher education system and higher. So that is one of the evident shortcoming of ranking. But I think that this also we should recognize the importance of the elite institutions. For me, elite institutions have an extra responsibility. There's a role model. There's much higher, I would say, list of responsibilities for elite institutions, like elite in society in general. It is a privilege, but it's also a responsibility. Definitely, they are not of the lack of the goodwill, but foremost due to the problems related to the such areas like arts and humanities and social sciences. In the international ranking, it is as the international rankings depend very much on the databases. Nowadays, particularly two, and like the produced by Elsevier, which is Scopus, and produced by Thomson Reuters, which is Web of Science. There is a third player now coming on the stage, which is a Google. But those databases are foremost catching the research production through journals. They don't cover such important expressions of academic research as monographs, as books, which are very important, particularly in the social sciences and humanities. So if historian is not the same academic culture and production of knowledge in physics or mathematics as it is in linguistic or languages or the history. So that is something which is a shortcoming. I will tell you a few words about how we are trying to cope with this. The problem is of the questioning of the methodology. There is a lot of arbitrary moments in the way how the methodologies are being constructed. It's true, The weights attached to the particular ranking is the preference of those who are doing the ranking. There's no broad consultation to the weights attached. It should be 5%, 10%, or not at all, or more or less. So that is very important. There's a lot of questioning about collection and verification of and transparency of the data which is used. But I would. President has had to leave it. It's true that there are some cases, unfortunate cases, in which a particular university's standing in the ranking has increased with a pace which we can question. It was too sudden, or we know that they don't produce so. And there are various ways. One which is totally unacceptable, and there are certain ways, I would call it gray areas. Totally unacceptable is when you are providing false data. When you have and we had some such cases at the international level. It was very well known story when the one professor from University of Alexandria was had a very high standing, and what has happened, he was rich enough to fund the production of the journal, paid the very prestigious editorial board, reviewers, and so on. So. But it was thanks to ranking that this has been discovered. So ranking can also be, it increases the level of awareness with regard to the whole ethical dimension of our work. You probably also came across, there was a series of articles in various journals, but including The Economist, about the weakness of the method of the assessment of research, which is so dear to academic community, which is peer review. The peer review is not perfect. So, as a defense to this, I can also use as an argument is that with all the shortcomings of the rankings, various degree mills or the factories for the useless wasting very high quality paper diplomas of fictitious higher education institutions, I don't know any ranking which would be so stupid as to publish. There was one story, but it's in the past in United States when the one ranking published the highly ranked faculty of law at Princeton, and Princeton doesn't have a faculty of law, but it was just but it happened only once, so and I doubt it will be in some cases there's too much reliance on the reputation, and then there's a problem of how you collect, how reliable is actually your survey. Another problem is an overuse of the English language. That's this. But I can, as a counter argument, I can say, come on, English became lingua franca of communication in the exchange of knowledge, and we are coming to the stage in which we are naturally bilingual. I just came from Denmark, and everyone speaks English, and it's not a big issue. I don't think that the fact that you will be bilingual, it's like we used to be in the Middle Ages, when the lingua franca was Latin. I think that this is something which will be a natural phenomenon. The problem will remain that we definitely need scientific production in the national languages in many areas. It's not. It is and. It is not either or situation. It is and. Well, next one. Well, as I already mentioned, that we are, and then when I said we, I probably will say that this is a more inclusive way, the ranking community, because IREG Observatory, which I represent here today, is taking very seriously the fact that ranking has been recognized as the information tool, but it's also as a transparency tool, as a quality instrument, and therefore responsibility comes with this, and this is why in 2009, when the group of individuals who look at the ranking in the occasional way decided to turn this network of individuals into an organization, and it was created a body which is called IREG Observatory on Academic Ranking and Excellence as a non-profit organization, which has as a goal. I had some leaflets about this organization. And has public awareness and understanding of academic ranking and in the context of academic excellence. we have just in Aalborg adopted a product which is called Guidelines for Stakeholders of University Rankings. I have a copy of it here. In 1 week or 2, it will be available on our website. It is a result of the intensive consultation with various stakeholders. For example, there are the specific guidelines for, in addition to general guidelines, to students and their parents, guidelines for higher education institutions, for policymakers, governments, and funding agencies, guidelines for employers, guidelines for quality assurance, accreditation, and diploma recognition bodies, and last but not least, guidelines for media and other displays of rankings. So this is a list of the recommendations, what rankings can do and what rankings cannot do. There are sometimes false expectations and mistaken accusations of ranking. So we try to make it very clear, and one general recommendation is that the ranking should be used as one of the tools for the decision making and never use it for as the only tool. So that is something which is valid for all the recommendation for all the stakeholders. We intend to translate this guidelines in all major languages of international circulation: Chinese, Spanish, French, Arabic. I think that we are gladly giving it, and we will honored to give it to the Bologna Training Center. If you want to translate it into Hebrew, there's no copyright claim on it. Actually, would be very interested and privileged if you would decide even to translate it into Hebrew and put it on your website. That is absolutely nothing against this. We also try to recognize that that we need to check. We have a trust is good, but control is sometimes appropriate. Also on the ranking organizations. So we came with an initiative which is called IREC Audit. It's we developed a mechanism for assessment of what actually the ranking organizations are doing in the process of producing the ranking. There's 20 criteria, which standards with a different weighting system, and we encourage ranking organizations to go through such an audit. We also have made it really great effort that this is being done not by us, but the group of people who have not vested interest in rankings. So we have a roster of the auditors who are not representing or somewhat linked with the ranking organization. In addition, we have a firewall between us, because it's the label is ours, IREC Observatory, but we have so-called IREC Audit Coordinator, who is a person who is coordinating articulation between those who are actually assessing such ranking and us who is taking a decision. Until now, only 3 ranking organizations passed through such audit, one with the QS, but let me emphasize that the QS, not all the ranking. We are giving the audit of the specific product, not of the whole agency. CHE in Germany, yeah, and one Polish ranking, Perspective ranking. Then,
what does the audit include? When you say QS passed it, I'd be very curious to understand what the audit is actually checking.
well, I mentioned that 20 criteria which are broken down into such aspect as methodology. What kind of how transparent is your methodology? What is the verification mechanisms for the collection of the data? Is there foreseen a clause, for example, that the object of ranking, of the institution of ranking, has an access to the way how the provided information is being treated? So this has to be reported in the self-evaluation report. And the self-evaluation report, they have to respond to those 20 questions. Yeah? And then the audit team is verifying if there's actually true. So if you are interested in this topic, I can send you the audit manual. Yeah, yeah. So do you give me? I have your card, and so that this is available. If it's not available until now on our website, I definitely will send you. That is something which is. And if you want to participate as the evaluator, we are really in the big shortage of the persons who can actually conduct the audit. I'm fishing. I'm trying to. Yeah. You know, one of I know that I already exceeded that, but one piece of information is that, because this is so often, and president of the Ben-Gurion University mentioned it, this criticism of the Shanghai ranking, that they use only Fields Medal, Nobel Prize and Fields Medal, the only two prizes. And he rightly pointed out that how many institutions can actually have a Nobel Prize laureates amongst themselves. Not to mention that the Shanghai ranking is actually using Nobel Prize only in certain fields. They don't use literature and the peace Nobel Prize. So it's even less. If I well remember, out of 800 plus laureates of Nobel Prize in the whole history of the Nobel Prize, so you are talking about 600 people, and not all of them are still alive. So attributing it to the one institution, not very many institutions can actually benefit from it. We are trying to improve it. We undertook an exercise, and this has been just again this. We are very happy we have finished this exercise. We came out with a called IREC list of international academic awards. It was we identified international academic awards. What are those awards about? And then we went, and I will shorten it. We went through the benchmarking exercise. We wanted to see how a particular award stands vis-a-vis Nobel Prize. If Nobel Prize for us was 1, how the other prizes are standing to. And out of 200 some awards, we came out to the very limited number of awards, which is at present in this list is 99 awards. And I'm very pleased, I look at the geographical distribution of those awards, and some of them come from Israel, like Wolf Foundation Award, that's that. And why we have done this? And we paid a lot of emphasis on awards in the areas which were not in the natural sciences, is humanities and social sciences. Why? Because we encourage, and this is a commitment also from the team producing Shanghai ranking, to take them into consideration, to enlarge the pool of the fields in which can be reflected through ranking. And this list will be available pretty soon on our website. I know it from the team preparing the Shanghai ranking. Then the Shanghai ranking produces 2 types of ranking. One is the institutional, and another one subject area ranking. And that is, they will not change methodology for institutional, but the subject ranking, they will already take into consideration this new list. Last but not least, we organize various events and conferences. The last one I mentioned to you, there was a forum in which we dealt with the subject ranking. The next one will be in May 2016 in Lisbon, in which we will look at the role of rankings in the whole story of internationalization. Are the ranking helping in this important area, or they are also making some problems that and we want to openly to talk about. The whole idea is that the rankings should serve something positive to improve the overall quality of this wonderful story, which is the higher education. Thank you very much.